Hey everyone, it's October 30th, 2024. And the Israel-Hamas conflict, it's everywhere right now.
It really is.
It's tough to keep up with it all.
Yeah, definitely.
So today we are going to deep dive into an AP News article
Okay.
we found that kind of breaks down a lot of the recent events
Uh-huh.
and helps us make sense of everything that's going on.
Sounds good.
And I'll tell you what,
Hmm.
there is some really tough stuff in this article.
Oh, yeah.
Like one thing that really stood out to me was this Israeli airstrike on a building in Beilahia.
Right.
And this building was sheltering displaced families,
Oh, wow.
families that had to leave their homes because of the fighting.
Oh, God.
And the death toll is
Yeah.
just, it's horrific.
Uh-huh.
And so many of the victims were women and children.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to see the impact this is having on civilians, you know?
Yeah, it really is.
Just trying to find safety and then
Right.
and they're caught in the crossfire.
Exactly. And this article really shows how the violence is escalating. Israel's increasing their airstrikes and their ground operations in northern Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And they say they're targeting Hamas militants.
Right.
But it's clear that civilians are bearing the brunt of this.
Absolutely. And the situation in Beit Lahia just underscores that point. The article goes into detail about two separate airstrikes that happened on October 29th.
Oh, God.
The first one was on a 5-story building. It killed at least 70 people. 23 people are still missing.
Wow.
Can you imagine, like, those families just not knowing what happened to their loved ones?
It's unimaginable.
It's just awful. And then to make matters worse, there was a second airstrike in Beit Lahia that same day that killed another 18 people.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's relentless.
And they said that Israel's investigating that first strike,
Mm-hmm.
but no word on the second one.
Interesting.
Makes you wonder.
Yeah, it does raise questions about, accountability and transparency.
Right.
And we also have to talk about the strain that all of this is putting on Gaza's healthcare system. I mean, they were already struggling after that Israeli raid on the hospital. Remember that? And now it's just completely overwhelmed with casualties from these airstrikes.
The article quotes a doctor there, and he says, the situation is catastrophic in every sense of the word.
Wow.
And apparently the only doctor left is a pediatrician
Oh, my gosh.
who's unable to perform critical surgeries.
It's just unimaginable.
Yeah.
That level of, just desperation and lack of resources, it's really hard to comprehend.
Absolutely. And, the international community is starting to react to this.
Yeah.
The U.S. State Department called the Beit Lahia strike a horrifying incident.
Right.
And, they're a strong ally of Israel, but they're acknowledging that this is having a huge impact on civilians.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how this event influences international opinion. Like, could this be a turning point that pushes for a stronger response from the global community?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Hamas has said that they're ready for ceasefire negotiations,
Okay.
but their demands haven't changed.
Oh, really?
So it makes you wonder if a lasting ceasefire is even achievable at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? Are the conditions right for meaningful dialogue, or is this just going to be a temporary pause in the fighting?
Right, exactly. And now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Okay.
Their leader was killed in that Israeli airstrike last month.
Right.
Well, they have a new leader now, Sheikh Naim Qassem.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, Hezbollah is that powerful political and militant group in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a long history of conflict with Israel.
Yeah.
And ever since the initial Hamas attack, they've been firing rockets into Israel.
Right.
So they've essentially opened up a second front in this war.
Wow.
And Qassem, the new leader, he has said that they will continue fighting until victory is achieved.
Oh, wow.
So that suggests that this conflict could go on for a long time.
Yeah, that's a chilling thought.
It really is.
It adds another layer of complexity to this situation.
Absolutely. And to make matters worse, on October 29th, Hezbollah launched rockets into northern Israel,
Oh.
and one person was killed.
Wow.
And then Israel retaliated with airstrikes inside Lebanon,
Okay.
and 5 people were killed there.
So it's an endless cycle of violence.
Yeah, it feels like this tit for tat is just going to keep escalating.
It's a really dangerous pattern.
It is.
Yeah.
And then on top of all of this, this AP article brings up another major development.
Okay.
Israel has decided to cut ties with UNRWA.
What?
which is the main UN agency responsible for providing aid to Palestinian refugees.
Wow, that's a big deal.
It is a huge deal.
Yeah,
This has been really controversial.
I bet.
Israel is accusing UNRWA of being infiltrated by Hamas and misusing aid resources. But UNRWA denies those claims.
Right. Well, and it's important to remember that UNRWA plays a vital role for, millions of Palestinian refugees.
Right.
They provide education, healthcare, emergency aid, like they are a lifeline for so many people.
Absolutely. And the UNRWA spokesperson, John Fowler, he warned that this could lead to a disaster within a series of disasters.
Wow.
If aid operations are disrupted.
That's a powerful statement.
It is. And, think about it, cutting off aid in the middle of a conflict.
Yeah.
In a region that's already facing a humanitarian crisis.
It's hard to even imagine.
It's unthinkable. And other UN agencies have also spoken out against Israel's decision.
Yeah, they're probably worried too.
They're highlighting how essential UNRWA is and expressing concern about how this is going to impact the Palestinian people.
Right, because if UNRWA can't operate, then who's going to step in and fill that void?
Exactly. And it's interesting because Israel says that they are committed to making sure that aid continues to reach Gaza.
Okay.
And they say that they're working to find a more efficient replacement for UNRWA.
An efficient replacement. Oh.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what does that even look like?
Right, like what are they envisioning?
Right.
And will it actually meet the needs of the people?
And how will aid reach those who need it if UNRWA is no longer involved?
That's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, a lot of questions. And the article really emphasizes how dire the humanitarian situation in Gaza is right now.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard reports about the displacement.
Yeah, 90% of the 2.3 million people living there are displaced from their homes.
90%. Wow.
And many families have had to flee multiple times.
It's hard to fathom that level of disruption and trauma.
It is. And to make matters worse, Israel is restricting aid to northern Gaza.
Oh, wow.
And the U.S. has even warned Israel that there could be repercussions for their military aid if they don't start facilitating humanitarian assistance.
So the stakes are getting even higher.
They really are. It feels like we're at a tipping point with so many lives hanging in the balance.
This AP article has given us a lot to think about, that's for sure.
It really has.
I mean, we've seen the devastating human cost of this conflict, the challenges of delivering aid, the potential for things to escalate even further. But there's still so much more to explore.
There is. So stay tuned, because in part 2, we're going to dive deeper into some of the potential solutions and the broader implications of this conflict.
Okay, I'm ready.
We'll look at the feasibility of Hamas's ceasefire demands, explore alternative aid delivery mechanisms, and try to make sense of what this all means for the future of the region.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so stay with us.
It certainly is a complex situation, and it seems to just keep changing every day.
It really does feel like every time there's a chance for a ceasefire, the violence just starts up again.
Yeah.
Hamas has said they're ready to negotiate, but they're still sticking to their original demands.
Right.
What are those demands, and how likely is it that Israel will agree to them?
Well, they're calling for an end to the blockade of Gaza,
Okay.
the release of Palestinian prisoners, and international recognition of a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital.
So these are demands that have been around for decades.
Exactly. These are like core issues that have been at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for a really long time.
And I imagine that Israel is not going to be too keen on meeting all of those demands, especially right now.
Yeah, you're right. Israel sees Hamas as a terrorist organization, and they've always rejected these demands, especially the one about releasing prisoners.
Yeah.
They see those prisoners as security threats, and they say the blockade is necessary to stop weapons from being smuggled in and to protect their citizens.
So if those demands are off the table, what's the point of even having negotiations?
Well, it's true that finding a lasting peace agreement is going to be really tough.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mistrust on both sides, and their versions of events are very different.
Right.
But even if a full peace deal isn't possible right now, there's still value in trying to get a ceasefire, even a temporary one.
That's true. I mean, even a short break in the fighting would give civilians a chance to catch their breath.
Exactly.
It would allow aid to get to the people who desperately need it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it could open up a chance for some kind of dialogue.
Right. It's all about building trust. And even small steps can make a difference.
Absolutely. So while the international community is trying to figure out how to get the peace process back on track, there's another really urgent issue.
Yeah.
The humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Right. And with Israel cutting ties with UNRWA, things are looking even worse.
So if UNRWA is out of the picture, what are the other options?
That's the big question right now, and there are no easy answers. Some people think that other UN agencies could step in,
Okay.
like the World Food Program or the UN Refugee Agency, but they're already dealing with crises all over the world.
Right. They're stretched pretty thin as it is.
Exactly. And they might not have the same experience or infrastructure as UNRWA.
Right. UNRWA has been working in this region for a long time.
Yeah, they have a lot of expertise.
So what else could be done?
Well, some people think that international NGOs could play a bigger role,
Okay.
but that raises concerns about coordination and who's accountable.
Yeah, and it's not easy to operate in a conflict zone.
Right, access is often restricted, and safety is a huge concern.
So it sounds like there's no perfect solution.
It's a really tough situation.
But one thing's for sure.
What's that?
The need for humanitarian aid in Gaza is urgent,
Absolutely.
and we need to find a way to deliver that aid effectively.
And impartially.
Yes, and it needs to get to the people who need it most.
Right.
Which brings us back to Israel's idea of replacing UNRWA with something more efficient.
Yeah, what does that even mean?
Right. What do they have in mind? And is it even possible to set up a whole new aid system in the middle of a conflict?
It's hard to say what Israel is planning.
Yeah.
Some people think they might try to work directly with the Palestinian authorities in Gaza,
Okay.
but with the tension between them and with Hamas being there, that seems unlikely.
And even if they could find a partner they could work with, it would take time to build trust and get everything set up.
Exactly.
And time is something that the people in Gaza don't have.
It's a race against time.
This deep dive has really shown how everything is connected. The conflict, the humanitarian crisis, the political stuff, it's all tangled up together.
And what's happening in Israel and Gaza affects the whole region.
Right.
Neighboring countries are already feeling the pressure.
We've seen how Hezbollah is involved in Lebanon,
Mm-hmm.
and there's always a risk that others could get dragged into this.
It's a very volatile situation.
So as we wrap up part 2 of this deep dive, I'm feeling kind of uneasy,
I understand.
and I have a lot of questions. What's going to happen to Israel and Gaza? Is there any hope for peace? And how can the world help?
Those are really important questions.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, isn't it? But we can't just ignore it, can we?
No, I don't think we can. I mean, this deep dive has really shown us that even if we feel like we can't do anything about this conflict, understanding what's going on is so important.
Right. It's like that saying, knowledge is power.
Exactly. And when we take the time to learn about these events and to see things from different perspectives and to really wrestle with these tough questions, we become more informed citizens and we're better able to have conversations about how to move forward.
That's a good point. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this. The violence, the suffering, the fact that it seems like this cycle just keeps repeating itself.
Yeah, I get that.
But I have to believe that there's still hope.
I think so too. And I think that hope comes from the resilience of people, the people who are working so hard to help those in need, and the possibility that maybe even in the midst of all this chaos, there's still a chance for dialogue and diplomacy.
So after everything we've talked about, what are you thinking about this conflict and what it all means?
That's a good question.
We've looked at the terrible loss of life, the challenges of getting aid to people, the political factors involved.
Right.
But it's important to remember that behind all the headlines and statistics, there are real people whose lives are being torn apart.
You're absolutely right. We have to remember to empathize with the families who have lost loved ones, with the children who are living in fear, with the communities that are just trying to survive.
Their stories are important, and we need to hear their voices.
We do.
And even though we don't have all the answers, I think this deep dive has given us a way to understand the main issues, the challenges, and the possible ways forward.
I agree. And maybe most importantly, it's made us ask some hard questions about the role of the international community, about whether the current ways of providing aid are working, and about whether there's any way to find a lasting solution to this conflict.
And those are questions that we need to keep thinking about and talking about.
Definitely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage everyone to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.
Yes.
Don't let the complexity of this situation make you feel powerless.
Use it to fuel your curiosity, your compassion, and your commitment to finding a better future for everyone involved.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.